All right, team, it's time to talk about the constructive constraint and productive failure elements of the game. Welcome to Drill 4.
Today's drill is vital to the critical thinking components of a makerspace.
So let's talk specifically about criteria before we get to the constructive constraints, because students need to have the criteria spelled out for them prior to coming up with a solution. So we want to give them that criteria in advance. Criteria identifies the way students will define success for their prototypes and their inventions. So simply put, criteria identifies the way students will define success for what they're doing. Like, will they feel like they have mastered it or they've completed it or they're successful? It will all depend on the criteria that is set.
This is absolutely necessary if you're focusing on STEM. As we have discussed, makerspace is more loosely based on STEM, but it does contain a maker mindset, and it's based on the design principles that are focused on the engineering design process. If you were studying a science topic, you would want the criteria to be aligned to facts and scientific thinking and engineering principles, but you would also want the solutions to be focused on real world problems and not necessarily focused on literature. So let's stick to makerspace thinking. I just want you to be aware of some of the differences.
So say you were challenging your students to build a roller coaster as a solution or as a model that you were revising upon based on, some feedback you got from passengers. You might want to include the following criteria. One loop that will defy gravity. So that might be one of the things that you want them to include in their roller coaster. And an entrance to the roller coaster. So they have to be able to get on the roller coaster. So you want the little Lego people or whatever you deem as the imaginary people to be able to get on the roller coaster. Another criteria might be that they have an exit. They have to include an exit on their roller coaster and one that's not going to get overcrowded. You might want to include that or have a criteria that they create their roller coaster so that that it can stand up on its own, so that when they let go of it, it doesn't fall over to the side and all the passengers die. So that might be a really important criteria to make sure that your students have. Now that students know what is expected, you can add in a constructive constraint, which refers to limitations that teams must observe when they are designing their solutions. For example, you may have to limit size or weight or materials, or you may even have to add a time constraint to keep the project doable. So these are some things that you could do as a constraint. So the final element that I want to cover in this drill is productive failure or productive struggle. We have spoken about this throughout the training, but I want to emphasize the power of failure. And I want us to take a look at it in a different way, because sometimes when we just hear that word, we feel like this is the end of the world. And we feel like we have come to this point where this is a terrible thing and we think it's awful. But failure really is how we learn. It is how we readjust. It makes us get back up. It makes us go again. And the earlier, the better. The faster we fail, the faster we learn to do it differently. Now, Makerspace allows us to put students in situations that are difficult, but it also gives us a good reason to discuss failure. And having these conversations with kids is so powerful, whether they're kids in your classroom or your own children. It is so important for them to understand that failure is necessary. It's a necessary part of life. And in our job, it's our job to show kids the way. And this can be really hard sometimes for us. And we want to avoid failure like the plague. But taking chances and dreaming big and innovation itself demands understanding that failure is a part of it all. So team, I hope you are ready to get out there and fail. Fail big, and then pick yourself up and go again. See you on the last drill of the season, and that's assessment.